Okay, I think what I'll point out to you is students that we do not serve with the project next. And those are students that have tardies only. If it's only an issue tardies, even 40 tardies, we don't work with those students. Students who are community referrals. We get a lot of calls from people in the community, everywhere from even principals to, you know, police, anybody. You know, next door neighbor has 7 kids or 4 kids that aren't in school, and I see them all the time. Those are called community referrals, and we will not deal with community referrals, only students who are enrolled in school, okay? And I think that's probably, oh, let me mention 2 other times. If we know that a student is actively involved with juvenile court, or if a student is in long-term family planning with SCF, those students are already presumably getting comprehensive case management. And school attendance is an issue in those cases too, and it's looked at, so we won't work with those students. Those are students that are not eligible for the project.
So basically, who fills out this student attendance initiative referral form?
Okay, once the list is generated that I explained to you, and the truancy clerk or liaison has discussed with the principal or with the principal's designee the list on that of students on that list, the students on that list. The principal then will say, this student yes, and will again give reasons for non-referral to the project. At that point, the truancy clerk then takes this form, which is the referral form for the project, and completes it, gets as much information as possible. The top part of the form is mostly demographic information specific to the student that would be helpful to the team going out. And the bottom part of the form is truancy interventions that the school has already done. The expectation with the project is that building staff will have already completed X number of interventions with the students. And buildings vary in terms of what kind of interventions they do. So we have principals and staff that do everything from phone calls, parent and student conferences, even principals that go out and do home visits, and other staff as well, to principals or buildings that have maybe very limited staff and only have the capability of making phone calls. So we need to understand as project staff what level of interventions have taken place by the building so that we have that information and know kind of where to take off from there. Okay.
And this form goes to the field office?
This form then comes back with the truancy clerk to a team staffing or a team meeting in which they will make assignments to who's going to go out in the field and follow up with which families. And the intent is that once the referral is made at the building level and the truancy clerk has the information, that they will be out in the field within 48 hours. Someone from the team will do that first knock and talk within 48 hours. So the intent is to do a very rapid follow-up.
Knock and talk.
Knock and talk. Knock on the door. Hello, how are you? You know, my name is, and explain the concern about the student's attendance, share information with the family, possibly even resources and support the family might need. Try to identify some of the concerns.
You have to knock and talk within how many hours?
48 hours. That's the goal, ideally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Killingsworth. That gives us
worked with, stand up, in the in Rockwood area and in the villa, a lot of the parents didn't have control over their kids, and a lot of them, they're living with a grandparent, they're living with their aunt, and their father could be in prison and the mother is on parole, and some of them you could threaten them with that concept, but the kid doesn't care. So the perspective we came from was working with the kid. You know, we'd work with the whole family, but we'd work with the kid and make them want to come back to school. Because we had parents call us and say, we can't do anything with the kids, can you help us? And a lot, you know, even if you tell the parent, we're going to have your PO, and the PO was involved, and the student didn't care. I mean, they were out partying, they wouldn't go to school, they were shoplifting in the malls, and so we'd go in and work with the kids that way and find something positive for them to work on, whether take them on a field trip, take them to lunch, we'd go to school with them, and get them more involved in school where they'd want to go themselves.
My environment. I came to Oregon, secured a job with State Correction System, and I've been working with them ever since. I've done counseling, I've been a parole officer, I've been a program administrator, I've done all of the jobs there. As part of my responsibilities with adult community justice, I was one of the pioneers of the supervising some of the most dangerous offenders in Multnomah County when Multnomah County was deciding whether or not they were going to arm parole and probation officers. So I have worked with some of the most serious offenders that this state has in its prison systems. When you start going out to the homes, you're going to enter an arena that's different. You go into other people's territory, and you're a visitor there, and you may or may not be welcomed. You need to be sensitive to various cultures, because if you're not, you can walk into some situations where you're perceived as the enemy right off the bat. The majority of some of the kids that you're going to be working with, some of the parents are currently under supervision. You're going to be dealing with youth that has parents that are currently under supervision, maybe under the influence, maybe selling drugs, maybe using them. There's going to be a lot of dysfunctions. You're going to walk into those situations. There have been instances when I've gone to home visits and I've walked in on drug transactions occurring, and that's a very awkward situation. I've walked in situations where there's been lewd sexual activity going on with children in the home. When you start going out into the field and into these homes, you're going to run into all those kinds of things. It's been my experience that when I go out to see the clients, or the friends, or the relatives, or someone other than the person that you're trying to connect with. I've been injured a couple of times in is gang area, territory. I've gone into home visits where shootings have occurred while I was out in the neighborhood. Fortunately, not in the same house, but on the same block. But when you start going out there, those are the kinds of things that you got to take into consideration and be aware of when you're out there so that you can maintain safety. Now, I see that a colleague of mine is going to be here talking about home visit safety, and she's going to get into more of those dynamics because there's a lot of concern relative to to home visit safety. I also volunteered as an athletic coach for the past 8 years. So I've interacted with the youth at Tubman, and at Whitaker, Grant, and at Benson, and I've had the opportunity to interact with them on a number of different levels. And I'll tell you, one of the things I've learned from them is that they're very, very distrustful of adults and of authority. As a matter of fact, we tried to do a gang presentation. We tried to bring Crips and Bloods together to talk about how to resolve their conflict. And you're talking about difficult clients. Crips and Bloods are very difficult. The concept, the whole philosophy, the dynamics that go on there, I still don't understand it. But one of the students stood up in the group and told me, he says, Goodman, he says, you don't know what it's like to live out here in this community with gangs, and he says, and you never will. And he says, there's nothing that you can tell me that's going to make any sense, so you just might as well sit down and basically shut up. And I wasn't able to make contact with that particular group. They went out that next weekend, and an explosion occurred with gang violence, and we kind of felt a little responsible for that because we tried to bring them together, and we missed the point. We did it wrong. Now, just getting back now to talking about the difficulties of working with difficult clients. First of all, when you go into the residence and you step into their homes, you're intruding already. And if you go in there, you need to be respectful of their surroundings. It may be modest. Indicate, well, I have business. I need to see your son. I don't give a dang what it is, but I didn't do anything wrong. You don't have the right to come into my house, and on and on and on. So I've learned over the years that when I do go into go into residence with colleagues of mine who are a bit more aggressive and a bit more disrespectful in communicating with the families, and the things just escalate very, very, very quickly. They can escalate very, very, very quickly. And my philosophy and my most effective way is to just assure the parents that, and the people in the residence, that my business there is official, but that I respect who you are as a human being, and also that I understand your culture. If I'm going into a family that's an Asian family, I'm extremely respectful. African American community or family, I go in there with respect, and I don't present myself as someone that is better than, more educated than, or anything like that. I maintain a human contact, and typically when I do that, I've had much, much more success. When I first started out in the corrections, and I would go out to those communities and gung-ho, young, wanted to do business, I was offending people and didn't know it, and I wasn't very productive, and my clients were beginning to resent me, and they didn't understand me. And it was because of my approach. I had to tone mine down. I had to figure out how to connect with the families in their homes. And once I did that, then I was able to walk into their houses and look around and talk to them, and walk into the kitchen and have a conversation in the kitchen, and they would say, just carry on and accept me into their home. I would typically go in and establish what my business was, make contact with the father, mother, whoever the person is going to greet you there, and then go ahead and begin to talk about your business. But first, with that respect and making sure that things are solidified, and that respect is established prior to any business taking place. If that occurs, then typically you will get much, much further with your business in the home. I have had to go into the bedrooms. We've had to search. Folks will give you permission to do that. Also, you need to look around when you're in there. You're not a police officer, you're not a parole officer, but you need to look around and see what's laying around in your immediate surroundings, so you know what you're dealing with and what environment that you're in. You want to look to see if there's needles around. If you're going into a home where there's meth being used, the potential for things escalating is so prevalent. It's just amazing. It can go from 0 to 10 just like that. If you're in a situation where crack is being used, the same kinds of things can occur. There are signs, there's matches, and there's just disarray. And you're going to find that when you start going into these homes. And you're also going to find that these people, the parents are typically going to be on probation for some crime or another. Without me going much, much further than that, why don't I open this up for any questions relative to your concerns about the business that you're going to be conducting out into the community, kids, families, home visits, and those kinds of things. Question back in the back.
Interesting that you did that with the Crips and the Blood and you did it wrong. How do you feel now that you should have done that?
Well, I tried to tell the Crips and Bloods that what they were doing was wrong, and their thinking about what it is that they were doing was such that they felt that I had no concept of what the issues were, and that I had no business telling them what to do, and that I was ignorant for even trying to do that. And if I hadn't had the experience of being out on the streets and having that kind of experience, then I had no validity or credibility telling them what to do. My approach now is that I do a whole lot of listening, and my approach to dealing with them now is I listen to them. I find out what the issues are for these clients, and respond accordingly, knowing what crimes they have committed, and acting accordingly. Yes.
You talked about being sensitive to various families.
Yes.
What about if there's not an English-speaking person there? How would you approach that in terms of trying to communicate, especially to define your official business? This is part of the student initiative.
Okay. Sure. Excellent. If I knew that there was a family that had a foreign language, I would make sure that I had a person or a colleague with me that was able to translate and to communicate, so that we would be able to make contact with the child and also communicate and do business. But you know, I can't say strongly enough that understanding that cultural piece is a very critical factor. You know, you go walking off in there, for example, can I use you as an example? Do you mind? Sure. Stand for a second. Now, with his stature, if he walked into a home of an Asian family, he's bringing intimidation with him right off the bat. Is this happening? That's what's going on, and that's some nonverbal stuff that's happening, and you need to be respectful of that. So you need to find a way to humble yourself and to be able to communicate and be non-threatening and communicate in a way that the family can see that you have business. And if you do that, things will open up. If you don't, you're going to have much more difficulty making contact with that particular family. On the flip side of that thing, if you go into, you can go ahead and sit down. If you are non-African American and you walk into an African American household, you better be respectful. Please do not go in and not take into consideration the respect factor. That's critical. If you do those basic things, then that'll allow you to go further with your business, and you'll begin to chop down the barriers as you get in there, and then you can start to deal with your client if you're able to make contact with them.
Can you just go through like a scenario that you've experienced when you're facing with an escalating situation?
Sure, I can. I'll tell you. There's many. I'll take one for example. I remember I went to a residence, and the mother there was using meth, and there was no food in the house, and we had middle school kids there, and there were some young kids there, and the mother was in violation, and there was some meth users all around in the living room. So I was two parole officers and myself. We go into the house, and there it is. That's what's going on. So I look around, and all of these people are just under the influence, and this is what they're doing, and the kids are right in the middle of it. So what's going through my mind as a probation officer is, okay, client's in violation, kids are at risk, so we got to get children's services out here, we got to get our client out here, we got to get these kids to a place where they can get food and care. Now, how do we do this? I took my client, to another part of the room, another part of the house, into a private room. At the same time, then the other people in the house began to, what are you doing to this person? Who are you? What are your business here? You don't have no business being in here. This is not your house. And it began to escalate to a point where they began to threaten us as parole officers. At that time, I was armed, but I don't want to shoot anybody under those kind of circumstances. I mean, you don't do that in this business that we're in. We had to leave the residence. I went and got the police, 4 or 5 cop cars. We came back to the residence. A number of the drug users had gone, but there were still some there. We went back into the residence. We forcibly arrested the mother and the kids. They were grabbing onto my legs, screaming, "Don't take my mom! Don't take my mom!" But I knew that there was no food there. I mean, they had to have care. So we did what we had to do to get the kids to CSD and to protective custody. Another example, I've gone into a residence where the father has come out and told me, "You don't have any business coming into my house. This is my household. I work every day. I pay my taxes," and on and on and on and on. And I listen, I say, I agree with you, sir, and that's all, you're absolutely right. However, your son is under supervision for this, your son has done this, and this is what I'm trying to do. I understand that this is an intrusion into your family circle, and I respect that, but here's what I'm trying to do. And I engaged the parent, and I gave him an opportunity to vent. I maintained my affect as calm and low, which allowed the parent to bring their affect on down so that we could communicate. And when that began to happen, then real business began to occur. So you as the worker, you're going to have to be in control of that aspect going in. You're going to have to be in control of that entire situation. You're going to need to know when to deal and when not to, when to go further and when to just leave. There will be times where you will not be able to conduct business because of the circumstances, and you need to know that.
Talking about coming into an aging house, but what I see is that if African American or whoever walks into my house, my family will look at their appearance first. That's how you dress and how you act.
That's correct.
And it's like if you walk in and I'm wearing sweatpants, sweatshirt, and a hat, they will not let you in.
That's right.
You're wearing a suit. It
That's-
doesn't matter if it's black or white, whoever.
That's my point.
You dress up, they let you in and they ask you like you did.
That's the point I'm making. Absolutely correct.
On the same hand, some people are also intimidated too by how big you are. Yeah.
Yes, and those are all key elements that you need to know going in. And I think that individually you're going to have to establish your own style, but you have to incorporate enough information so that when you do go out there, you have some tools to communicate with these families. Because see, just imagine this. Imagine somebody coming into your house, into your home, doing business. I mean, making some decisions about your kid. Think about that. That's what's really going on. And we have to, and our task is to find a way to do that in the most productive way possible. And typically, not in all cases now, but typically what you're going to find is you're going to find the kids that are really having the most trouble are the kids that don't have the family structure that's in place. And that's saying that typically the parents are in trouble as well. In almost every case that I got on probation, where the dad is not in the home and the mom is there, and there's some struggling going on. There's some significant stuff happening there. So you're going to be dealing with the extended family. I mean, you're just going to have to deal with it. That's part of it. That's part of the package. And if they don't want to let you in the house, then I think that's really what your task is going to be about, is actually getting in there. I think once you make contact with the particular student and the student typically knows what they've done wrong and why you're there, and that they've done something and then there's a response for it. But getting to that particular point is really the key. You got a question back there?
I'm not sure if this is for you or Helen, so I can relate this now, but do we have like an SAI protocol for interviews or child engagement? Or did I miss that? I don't know.
We had somebody from SCF come out and talk to you as to what the signs are. Yes, we do have a protocol.
I will tell you that as any public servant, if you notice child abuse and neglect, you have a responsibility to report it, to do something.
Just on the flip side, what Shane was talking about, typically in African American families, you walk in with a suit on, they're going to think that there's something wrong, and that doesn't exist to the most part. It's just kind of, you got to really check the caseload and see who you're dealing with that day and decide and go from there.
But then let's take that a little further. If I come to your residence and I am dressed in a suit, and I come in and talk to you and is respectful of you, and let you know why I'm there and that I have some concerns about your son, and I make contact with you on a human level, do you think that'll make a difference?
Yeah, definitely.
That's my point. And I think that's the key. If I can leave anything with you, that is the key factor. as parole officers, where we make our biggest mistake is we throw this authority thing around too much sometimes. And when we go to residences, we go there, you know, thinking that we can just go into folks' homes and we can just do our business. And that's where we run into trouble. You know, we just can't do that. This is a human service business. And there are also cultures out there, ethnic groups, who's really intimidated by authorities coming to their doors. We have people that are new to the country, new to Oregon, who don't understand what's going on. Why are you doing this? I mean, this is. I've never had this experience before, and will hide from you and will not let you in, and so forth and so on. Now, to talk more about, you know, difficulties in dealing with difficult clients, you know, I have had to deal with clients who have been in institutions that have committed, you know, some of the most heinous crimes, you know, from the most sadistic rapes to the most sadistic murders, all the way down to the drug cases. And one of the philosophies that has always worked well for me, and all the social scientists and criminologists that I've read and studied about, if you are firm with your business, but you are fair with your folks that you're dealing with, typically you're going to be on fairly solid ground. And although you may have an argument, you may have a person who just goes off the scale real quickly in terms of anger, and that's what you're going to have in these families. You're going to have people that get pissed off just like that, and will just go from 0 to 10 in just a matter of minutes. And so your responsibility then is to just let them go there, just don't go there with them. And if they were to call on you the N-word or a derogatory word or an ethnic slur to you, you just have to just let them come down and let them apologize to you if you're going to do business. That's very difficult to do. Yes.
Well, first of all, in my experience dealing with youth and juveniles, it's a lot more effective when you're explaining everything that's going on.
That's correct.
A lot of times we know what's going on, we know what we're doing, but we don't take the time to explain them. I'm doing this for this reason, this is why I'm here, this is why I'm asking you to do this. And for some situations, I mean, I think that's what we need to do with the parents as well. I mean, you know, we assume that sometimes adults will be able to, you know, communicate with you on an adult level. We assume that, but a lot of times these parents may not have much more skills than their kids do.
You're right.
When we go in, we have to explain to the parents, just like we would talk to the kids, explain them exactly why we're here and what our intentions are, and I'm here to support you as a parent, and you know, this is why I'm here. And really detail it, explaining everything that we're trying to do, which may take a little bit more time, but I think if we're really trying to be impactful, we have to go that extra step in trying to explain to them so they feel comfortable about why we're there.
Well, that's the key, and that's what, and I think you got a handle on it. However, what would you do if you went to the residence and this gentleman came to the door right here and said to you, "I don't want you in my house," and you say to him, "Well, your son didn't come to school today," and he says, "Well, I do not give a damn. You're not coming in my house." And then he starts up this escalation ladder with his anger, telling you why he dislikes you and why you shouldn't be on his porch and why you should get off the porch. And he throws open the door and steps out on the porch with, how much did he weigh? Huh? About how much? In bulk. About 220. And he throws his 220 out there. Now, how do you make contact and do business with this particular parent? Okay, now that's the critical issue, and I'm suggesting is that you stand your ground to a point, and you try to listen to this particular parent, and you try to de-escalate, and you use all your counseling skills and all your training to get him to understand that you understand he's angry and you understand he's mad, but you don't want to make him any more angry, and if he wants you to leave, you'll leave, you know. And if you need to, go away. But try to establish that communication after you have diffused that anger. If you do that, then maybe you'll get to the next step. And then at that particular point in time, everything that you've said will come into play.
In the near future, even though my job might not consist, but I might be asked to go on a knock and talk, and I have to come in contact and approach a parent. Which is the parole officer or the probation officer strapped on?
Some are, yes. Probation and parole officers now are optionally armed. If you, first of all, when you start doing this, you're gonna start coming in contact with the police a lot, with the school police a lot, with the parole and probation officers a lot. The county parole officers are not armed at this point in time. The adult parole and probation officers are armed optionally at this particular point in time. And you're gonna come in contact with all of those different agencies now because you're gonna be working with the same families and the same groups of scenarios. You may come to a residence when one of the parole officers is taking the parent out for violation of being strung out on crack or crank or whatever the case may be, and you may be called to respond to the child situation. Or you may be there at the same time that the parole officer opts to go out and do that. So you'll be coming in contact with those kinds of scenarios. And Sue, when she gets in today, she'll give you more detail about the safety aspects of home visits and what have you. And I don't want to get too deep into the safety aspect of it because that's a whole different scenario within itself. Yes.
I guess I want clarification to see if we're talking about much the same thing.
Okay.
As a teacher, if I would have a parent come in and they were outraged and angry at me, if I was able to not take it personally and realize that they were more angry because they were either shamed because of the child's behavior in the class, or they were feeling guilty about themselves as a parent and why they were taking on the student's actions. And so if you could just diffuse it and let them say what they had to say, and maybe even empathize with them. I understand how you feel. I'm sure this is embarrassing or whatever they were saying. It helped a lot. Is that the same sort of thing?
Yes, it is.
Dealing with displaced anger?
Yes.
More so than anger at you personally?
Yes, you're dealing with displaced anger, but sometimes it's specifically placed at you because you're at their house.
Right.
See, that's the different variable. That's the variable here that's key. When you step up onto the porch and enter the house, then you're in their territory, and sometimes some of the parents really resent that. I mean, sometimes the child has burned the bridges at home, and sometimes they're so angry with the child that they're not willing to deal with you in a rehabilitative way sometimes, and you still got to conduct business, and then yes, you will need to use those skills in terms of defusing, but I want you to know that sometimes it's going to be to you. It's going to be up close and personal. It's going to be, I'm going to use terms that's real, okay? It's going to be used, the N-word is going to be used at you. I was arresting a guy the other day, and he was calling me the N-word, all the way to jail. You're going to be called, women would be called the B-word directly. I mean, that's up close and personal. When they're angry with you, when that occurs, not in every situation, but that's what you potentially will face. That stuff you can't let personalize. You can't take that personal. You have to let that go. When I was a younger person, and someone would assault me that way verbally, it was very difficult for me to handle that. I mean, I'd be nervous and all kind of reactions to those kinds of things. And now I understand human behavior now, and that's just one way that the individual is using to assault me. That is an assault. If you look up the definitions, in anger management, you'll find that assault can be verbal, and that is a verbal assault. So when that do occur, and it will occur, don't take that personal. Please, just don't, because don't internalize it personally, I should say.
You talked about being respectful. Can you be more specific?
Yes, I will. This young woman stated a few moments ago about appearance, going to the residence. You come to a family's home. I usually say to the parents, I use yes sir and yes ma'am when I respond to them, and I give them respect. And I ask them, may I come in? And they'll tell me, sure, come on in. I'll step on in. And then I'll continue to ask for permission to do my business in their residence. And if they allow me to do it, then fine. You know, just let me give you some more information. As a parole officer, I have walked in and using these techniques and asked to search their house. And they said, okay, go ahead. You know, I go in pulling open drawers and looking for guns and drugs, and all of this with the consent of the people, with the consent of the parents, only because they felt that they knew that I had business, but they also respected the fact that I was respectful of them, and that this guy can't be all bad. Let's just let him see what he's got to do and let him get out of here. Yes.
This might be funny to a lot of people. When you go to an Asian family, the first thing they ask you come in, the first thing you look at is how clean is the carpet, and you have to pick up your shoes.
That's right.
Well, this might be funny, but it's true.
That is not.
Walking in with your shoes,
That's right.
look at you really funny. And until you, I mean, you keep on looking at your feet until you pick up your shoes.
Right.
Well, they will ask you to pick up your shoes. If not, then you disrespect them.
Right off the bat.
Or you should ask when you walk in.
Right.
Would you
Yeah.
like me to pick up your shoes?
Right. Those kinds of things will be very, very helpful to you. That'll create a barrier for you right off the bat. But there's a lot of different dynamics relative to the various cultures, and I don't know. We'll come right to you. And I don't know, you know, how much training you're going to get or how much training you have.
Let me know if I'm not projecting loud enough for all of you, okay? You've got a handout in front of you that has a lot of facts about Adult and Family Services. Adult and Family Services is the agency that locally delivers the welfare benefits. That's the cash benefits that families live on. That includes food stamps, employment-related daycare, the eligibility for the Oregon Health Plan, as well as some other medical programs. And I think why we're a critical partner to talk with you is that in national studies that are completed by Manpower Demonstration Research Corporation, which is MDRC, a nationally noted program evaluator, they have been unable to find a program nationally that in a second chance program can reach the outcomes of a first chance program, regardless of the age of the participants. Why that's significant is that any second chance program is any time children are re-entered into sort of a mainstream education program or an alternative education program. Their earning capacity has not been able to reach the earning capacity of children who go through as a first chance. There's numerous reasons that children disengage from school. You know that. You probably spent days talking about that. But one of the pieces that comes up for us are the pieces around poverty. When a family is living on welfare, they're at 75% of the accepted poverty rate. So we've already figured out that poverty is a horrible place to be. You've got studies around children's well-being. You've got studies around early childhood development. You've got studies on interpersonal development that talk about the risks of poverty. When they're receiving cash benefits, they're at 75% of it here in the state of Oregon. And we pay one of the higher grants across the country. So living below poverty is one of those risk factors for disengaging from numerous sort of mainstream activities. Teen pregnancy, juvenile crime, all of those come up as reasons that children and adolescents drop out of school. So as we started to look at the only way to kind of escape from poverty, in fact, not the only way, the largest way to escape from poverty is the green side of this picture, which is 53% of the exits from poverty on a national study are from employment. You've got some other reasons. Some people marry a little bit better. There's about 11% there. Sometimes there's family changes. There's about 20% there. And other income is 16%. But really, the source out of poverty, the exit out of poverty, is through employment. A lot of what you have in your handout talks about how Adult and Family Services has moved itself from an eligibility-based program where we determined what the value of your vehicles happened to be, what your rent amount was, did a math formula and came out with a benefit at the other end that we effectively, efficiently delivered to households across Oregon every single month, to an agency that works towards a family becoming employed or maximizing its self-sufficiency potential. That's been a big cultural change, and I think one of your partners that hopefully you'll be working with will be within these families will be the Adult and Family Services case manager. Part of having employable adults in the caseload is having a stable children situation for the children. So that includes safe and stable child care as well as stable school enrollment. And when those things are sort of moving along, it also helps the family to stay employed. It also helps the family to focus on employment and gaining those next skills to get pay raises. As we work with the families, one of the things that we came to notice is that first we began working with the teens that were already parenting. Oregon is a leader in reattaching those teens back into schools, working with the schools to adapt programs that would accept them back in. We have ongoing, about 90% of those teens re-engaged in an education process and again working towards employment. But you know, it's only the first step, because to get into that very good program, you needed to have already probably dropped out, but secondarily already have had a teen birth. And in looking at our households, we thought, what more can we do around prevention? That was actually a pretty big change from the fact that we delivered benefits to now we're looking at prevention activities. So within those households, we have had experiments of running the school attendance records to our cash assistance households. Probably no surprise, sometimes there is a 70% absenteeism. So there's a high number that aren't enrolled in school. There's a very high number that have absenteeism. And we're not talking about those difficult teen years. We're talking about much earlier, sometimes as early as 2nd and 3rd grade. For our families, one thing that comes up repeatedly seems fairly simple in a conversation that I'll be having with you, and that's dealing with head lice. A lot of the absenteeism of those young children has to do that in a household at 75% of poverty, head lice is a difficult hurdle to overcome. If anyone's bought whatever it is, A200 pyronate lately, not usually on sale for 99 cents a bottle at Rite Aid. It's going to be in the more expensive section. The fact that you need to launder all your clothes, there's some things you need to dry clean, you need to have a vacuum cleaner. The list goes on and on. Cleaning supplies, shampoo, all the kids' gear. And what happens is that because they're not able to overcome that one example of it, the kids are not allowed back in school, which makes a lot of sense. But there isn't, that's sort of one of those things that was, for us, was going very unnoticed in our families. We continue to issue the benefits. The kids continue to struggle with challenges for getting to school. Somewhere in the place you've got a broken process. What we're looking at doing is getting much more involved in that school attendance factor. There are models around the nation that are called school fare. Wisconsin started one of those. They deducted cash out of the welfare grant for the days that the children were absent from school. What they found in that experiment is that it really did not increase school attendance, because what you haven't really still dealt with are the reasons that these families cannot get their children to school. And I think that that's how we want to do it differently. Instead of looking at a punitive model, looking at the enhancement model, looking at what is it that that family is going to need. Can we rally a group of volunteers through the Department of Human Resources volunteer program to go in and help clean one of these homes where there's a lice infestation? Can we help with the transportation to school? Can we help with some other challenges that might be coming up? That's, I think, a piece where you could find our case manager is a good resource for you. A second article that I've attached at the back of this handout, actually I imagine it's about the middle of the handout, it's called Family Works, Substance Abuse Treatment and Welfare Reform. The National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse, which is CASA, has selected Oregon as one of 5 states that it's going to profile for the our connectivity between substance abuse and violence, treatment around violence, and welfare reform. They believe that we are one of the models in the nation of understanding the triangulation of these three issues. There's two excellent quotes that I've starred on the right-hand side that I'll be somewhat redundant and read them, although I know you're capable of looking at it. But poverty, addiction, and violence are locked together in a self-perpetuating relationship in which cause and effect are virtually indistinguishable. Violence, which is domestic violence, violence in the home, violence to the children, which pervades the lives of both poor and addicted individuals, is especially present for women in this population. On welfare, somewhere between 50 to 75% of the women that we serve have been in a domestic violence situation or are currently in one, which impacts, as you know, greatly the children. The second bullet is that employment plays a critical role in helping women move away from addiction, poverty, and abuse. As you begin to work with the children in these households, I think it's critical for you to know that we also could have plans with the adults in the household. If you're working with drug and alcohol issues in the children, but not able to address those in the adults, we would be a great partner for being able to leverage services so that all are getting treated, and so that we can have in our plan to cooperate with your initiatives and also to follow through with drug and alcohol treatment. As you're moving into your positions, am hoping that the last 3 pages will be of value to you. Although these list statewide, and I'm sure sometimes you have transfers, they also list the local district manager and the operations managers for adult and family services in each of the Portland or Tri-County area. If you're wanting to connect with a case manager on a case, and if you're wanting to partner, this is a great person to call first if you're at a loss of who to call. In the plans that we develop, we are able to support the families in additional support service payments around challenges that they might be facing. So for example, you've got some kids that you've identified do not have school clothes. They don't have what they need to be able to get to school. You've put that as a high priority. We would be able to work with getting payments for that. Might be a winter coat, might be some rain things. Might be that you identify that they need to have their own transportation and the transportation system isn't working. We might be able to purchase the bus pass for them to be able to get back to school, purchase things around a vehicle for them to get to school. So please think of us in that way too, as one of your resources in the community. Pieces about poverty that I think are very critical to think about is that poverty is one of the factors of a classist diversity structure. And as you're working with the kids that are in poverty, they have class barriers, as I'm sure I'm repeating things you've had over the last 4 days, that I think it's critical to get to know the sense of the family. Our caseload is about 18,000 households in the state that are on public assistance. Those are female-headed households, so you're having a single parent household with perhaps boyfriends that are moving in and out, but not 2-parent households. Our 2-parent households in the state are about 1,000. So as you had the earlier discussion about the culture of the family as you're moving into it, I think one of those in poverty is that they're generally headed by females. As you move into the food stamp program, we have about 55,000 households that receive food stamps in Oregon. Those households have a lot of the same mix. They have about 75% that are single female head of households that again are living at or near poverty because they are eligible for a poverty-based program. Employment-related daycare is a sliding fee scale that helps to pay for child care while low-income families are working. And those are an even higher percentage of about 89% that are headed by females. so part of that culture, there's numerous books and articles on the feminization of poverty. I think that that's a face that you will see. The piece that goes around that is certainly the aspect of domestic violence, and also our role in facilitating batterer's intervention for the other members of the household that are doing pieces of that violence. They said that you really like to get out for an early lunch, so I'm going to keep my comments incredibly brief, and I'll love if you have any questions about either our services or topics in general. Yes? Yes.
Want to take a look, please? It says home contact safety. Okay, everybody have a packet? Yes, if not, I've got some more up here. What we're going to do today, we've got 3 hours scheduled. The first 2 will be lecture. I would like to break every hour on the hour. I think everybody, especially after lunch, needs the break, and I know I always do. Would you be kind of the break monitor? Holler at me in an hour. Okay, please, because I won't pay that much attention. The last hour, we will break into 5 groups, and we have 5 different home contact scenarios that Deidre was kind enough to write for us. Those that aren't actually doing home contacts will have the choice of joining a group and participating in the discussion, or I can meet with them in the back room and talk about office safety and some ideas and some training that I've done in that area for about 10 minutes. Either one is okay with me. However, so that'll be your choice. And we'll just do a count off when it comes to the 3rd hour. I understand that Carl Goodman was here this morning. And I've worked with him for 15 years and as an officer and as a manager. I'm a program administrator, parole and probation officer out of the Portland North Office of Adult Community Justice. I had to think about what we were now. I wanted to talk first about this. There's always concerns when we start out. I hear there's always a lot of questions that come into people's minds. I know I did a 3-day class just a few weeks ago on street survival. This sometimes is the end result if we're not cautious about how we think about what we're doing. My idea always is to plan for the worst and to really believe that that most often the best is going to occur over the majority of the times. Okay? Paranoid, characterized by suspiciousness, persecutory trends, or megalomania, and extremely fearful. We don't want to go there. We don't need to be safe. I want to talk about safety today. Some people will say, why am I here? I won't be doing home contacts. As you will see for about the first half hour, a lot of the information that you will receive occurs long before you ever hit the front porch. As a matter of fact, it's probably an hour's worth of information of elements of safety that occur before you hit the front porch. Safety is everyone's concern. It starts with the first phone call at the school on whatever information that you receive from the parents. I had a child at Willamette Primary for 7 years. I know that the front desk support staff knew me very well and probably knew a lot about my family. It will be up to you to try to figure out how to develop a system that you get that communication to each other about things that you know. Don't ever believe that something is minor. Trust your instinct. You don't have to be a highly trained professional in the area of field safety to have concerns to pass along to the other people. I saw that one of the quick referrals in a packet that I got in advance. Okay, look at the referral forms that you use. What else could be on there? How are you going to communicate from agency to agency about different things that you know about the family. One key may be something that you find out later that could have made a real difference in how you decided to proceed. Safety. What I found interesting when I was on the internet doing this is that the word first appeared in the 14th century. And it's the condition of being safe from undergoing or causing hurt, injury, or loss. What we want to be cautious. And we want to be alert. And this first appeared in the 1500s, almost 1600. And caution is a prudent forethought to minimize risk, and precaution, a measure taken beforehand. Okay, once again, it's before you ever get there. The planning starts to prevent harm or secure good. I'm going to use some words that I always find turn some people off because they think we're not police officers. We don't use those skills. That isn't good relationship building. And the terms are tactical, and I will use that term tactical. If you look at the definition, once again, it's actually an old term. One of the definitions is adroit in planning or maneuvering to accomplish a purpose. That's not a judgment issue. Same thing with tactics. It's the art or skill of employing available means to accomplish an end, a system or mode of procedure. And that's what I'm hoping that you all go back and start talking about in your teams and with the different agencies you work with. What type of systems, what type of procedures can you develop to work with each other and plan safety? And tactic is a device for accomplishing an end. One of the relatively newer terms that I ran into was safety net. I consider training your safety net. Safety net is something that provides security against misfortune or difficulty. Studies show that when stressed, you will revert to your training. Try to do the same thing at the same time. Carry your car keys in the same pocket. Yeah, I just lost my whole lesson plan. Let me put up the performance objectives for a minute while I get my packet together. I don't know if we will get through all of those. I actually ranked them in a manner of what I didn't think that you would know as well to what I'm fairly confident that a group such as yourself would already be very competent in, which is relationship building, basically talking nicely. One of the other things that I'm always concerned about when I do trainings on home contact safety, and I do this at the police academy a little bit differently, and I do it to parole and probation officers. Generally, we're nice people. We try to think rationally. We try to interact with people in a decent manner. Manners can get people hurt. It is okay to raise your voice a little bit. Okay? It is okay to tell somebody to stop, back off, and leave. That's perfectly okay. I have seen films where people get seriously injured because they keep trying to talk to someone that is totally irrational, high on methamphetamines, paranoid, psychopathic, high on crack cocaine, and those are generally your more volatile folks. So I'm not saying don't have good manners, but pay attention to the situation and think about how we're trained. I basically was trained to talk nicely to people, okay? And it's been very hard for me to learn to give commands, which is stop, back off, sit down over there, and I don't usually leave, but you will hopefully know that that's your cue. It's time to go out the back door or the front door. Let's talk a little bit about attitudes of safety. It all starts up here in the brain. The way you think about it is how, by thinking about it in advance, you gain the tactical edge. Once again, tactical edge just means you're thinking about what you're doing and where you're going and how you're going to do it. Mental conditioning. Role play different situations that you've been in or you think you might be in. It can prepare you for those crisis encounters before it happens and help you cope with stressful hazards during and after the occurrence. I role play a lot of things in my mind that will never happen to me in the field. Hopefully they will never happen to me. Once again, you are likely in a stressful situation to do what you role played in your mind and what you physically trained to do. Tactical thinking. By watching your environment, it helps you safely and confidently approach highly stressful situations. And physical conditioning. I know that I can get over a 5-foot fence. And I think that's important. I want to be able to survive when I'm leaving. I don't have a problem with thinking that I'm going to have to exit a situation. It is perfectly okay to leave. That doesn't mean everybody's a marathon runner. That's not going to happen. But once again, physical conditioning is as important as your mental conditioning. And verbal skills. And that's what I suspect that all of you are highly trained in and very good at. That can enable you to prevent a volatile confrontation from escalating and help you to diffuse a potentially hostile situation. Let's take a look at how you prepare to go out into the field. Like I said, it all starts at the very beginning. It starts back at the office. Some of you will have more information than others. And once again, that will be something you will need to do to develop a system. Read all available file material. Do not skimp on this. I know that you are all busy. We are very busy also. But this is where mistakes are made by saying, oh, I know this person. Oh, I heard about that. So-and-so told me about him. Okay? Read everything that you can get your hands on. Some of you will have information available from the Portland Police Data System. If you can get the resident record checks, get them. One of the things that I've talked to Jimmy Brown about will be what type of access do people have to different law enforcement data systems. What type of information will school police maybe provide you with? And then, of course, CPS is involved in some of the cases that you're working with. Get any kind of information, write it down, put it in a file. It doesn't have to be pretty. Drop file it. Write it on a Post-it note if you have to, but don't just set that type of information aside. Try to identify what type of potential safety hazards there are before you go out. Again, what do you know about the history of alcohol and drug abuse of this family? Kids aren't in school for a reason. Now, I understand that about 1/3 are lice calls. In terms of kids have been out of school for a while because of lice epidemics, and they've run through all the schools where I live too. However, most people do get their kids back in school in a reasonable amount of time. So there's still some issues in that household that are contributing to why a child is not in school. What do you know about criminality issues in the family? There are a couple families in Northeast Portland, actually all over the city where I've worked, and I've worked in 3 different districts now, that we can track over 3 generations of family members involved in the criminal justice system to the great-grandparents. Get to know who those family members are. Find out what is their general trend. Some of the trends will be drug dealing. Some of the trends will be domestic violence, and then you'll find the trends of property crimes usually. Be aware of the geographic location. Also be aware that some areas that may look okay some of the inner southeast areas are as dangerous as any other place in the city. In fact, they have a higher assault rate than some of the areas that people traditionally believe are more dangerous. Talk to your local law enforcement officer, get the reports from the Portland Police Bureau or the Sheriff's Office, their annual reports on crimes reported. That'll give you a general idea. There's a lot of information out there to gather from. Sit down with your team or the person that you're going into the field with. Review the stuff that you know. Review the file material with them. Staff the case. What is the plan? How are you going to go about this? What are the risk issues? They may be thinking of something you hadn't thought of, and that's very important for the other person to have the same information when you're trying to walk up to that house that you had. Prepare an itinerary, and I think this is really important. It's something that people don't do. Okay, devise a form. We have one. I want to know if one of my staff is very late or doesn't come back. I'd like to know where they've gone. We're now on emergency dispatch radios. However, everyone still leaves an itinerary. Develop a form. Include on it your license plate number. We need to know what you're driving, your license plate number. What's your pager number? What's the cell phone number that you've got? What addresses are you going to? Are there any red flags on any of those addresses that are maybe a little bit higher risk than some of the other cases, okay? Leave that, make arrangements. Leave that with your supervisor or with another designated person that tracks whether or not you come and you go and when you get back. Be sure to leave designated times. Call in if you're going to be late. It really concerns people back at the office, and it does me when people don't come back within about half an hour of when they're checked out too, and they have left itineraries. Wear clothing and shoes that enable you to function efficiently if you must retreat. Okay? And I think that's really important. I watch people running around in sandals. Sandals are not helpful to run in. Sandals also are not helpful when you're going up on the front porch and your foot goes through one of the boards, which has happened. So there's a lot of different reasons to wear good footwear. Nails. You'll be walking up to some residences that aren't incredibly well kept, and you also don't really want to nail through your sandal. I tend to wear really good tennis shoes or hiking boots of some kind and a pair of blue jeans. During the summer, women always ask me, well, what about during the summer? I wear cotton dresses. So do I. I wear shorts under my cotton dresses. I mean, that's one of my responses. Staff safety is not so rigid that you can't think of other ways to accomplish the same goal that also makes you comfortable. Okay. That helps my comfort level. And so I wear shorts under my cotton skirts during the summer, and that's not unusual. So think about those different things as you go along. Pretty soon it's going to start raining constantly. It is going to be dark at 4:30. Now some people say we never go out at nighttime. It can be dark at 3:30. It can be dark at noon. It could start raining and rain for 41 days maybe straight. Don't get run over by a car. Once again, staff safety is not just from the occupant or from another human being per se. You don't want to trip over a curb and break your ankle. You don't want to get hit by a car when you get out into traffic because you're wearing blue jeans and a blue jean jacket. So think about what you're wearing. Most of you wouldn't send your kids out at night with something that was reflective. And when I grew up, they always talked about wearing light clothing. That is also staff safety. Think about whether or not you have the necessary safety and vehicle equipment. I am a fan of using agency cars. For one thing, we are not allowed to use our own personal cars when we're doing field work. I understand that some of you do. If you can use a county car or an agency car, I would do that. For one thing, the license plate, although they are now restricted, will not come back to you. Often they are in better condition. Not always. Often they are in better condition than the car that you may be driving. That is also a very serious safety concern, is the operational systems of your vehicle. They need to all be in order. During the winter, you need some emergency equipment. Breakdowns occur. I assume that since this is Multnomah County, people will end up in Corbett and Bridalveil. And that's a district I used to work. My cell phone and my emergency dispatch radio did not always work in different parts of Corbett. Put together a home contact kit of some kind. And I know that Joanne Fuller and Jimmy Brown, for those of you who work for them, are very committed to this. And I've talked to them about cell phones for everybody, mini mag lights, emergency kits in cars, and so start working through your supervisor in these areas. You really do need a cell phone, minimum. Agency identification. People are going to want to know who you are. Sometimes that makes a big difference, and it makes a difference to the positive by people knowing who you are. No one likes the identified or the unknown. Have agency ID, a mini flashlight. Have business cards to hand out to people. In your vehicle, have a first aid kit. It may be you that just trips over that curb. Have a map of area streets. Getting lost is a problem. I've seen fog so thick in different parts of Portland that you could get lost almost at 8 or 9 a.m. and have a hard time seeing a stoplight. Try to know your district. Have a map. Drive your district or the area that you're trying to serve. Get to know where the McDonald's is. If you can't go by street sign, go by other landmarks within your district. Most streets, or not, all cities have ways, streets run one way, avenues run another, there's 100 blocks. Taxi cab companies have great maps, besides the Thompson Guide. Taxi cabs have to get to a lot of different places. So does BOEC, which is the Bureau of Emergency Dispatch. Start requesting information from different people, keeping it in a file folder and giving it to everybody. Try to know where you're going in advance. And most important, and something that people don't think about, if you're working in pairs, both people need keys to the car. If something happens and you're not the person with the keys to the car, how are you going to get help? This stuff is all that you'll do before you even leave. Okay, be prepared. So you think you know what you're doing. I always think that, and then something happens and changes that. You're on your way out to the field. What do you do then? We just talked about knowing the address. City streets have identifiable features. By the way, Gresham is mapped the opposite of Portland, which always drove me nuts when I worked out there. Their avenues and streets are the exact opposite of the way Portland was laid out. I always preferred working northwest, where it was alphabetical. Think about so you think you know about where the house is. You haven't been there before. Try not to park directly in front of the residence. If something happens, you really don't want people to know where you're going. Okay, park one house up. That's okay. Don't park where you could be blocked. Please don't pull into people's driveways and park the car. Somebody can park right behind you. You'll also have to use reverse if you need to bail out of there. That takes a lot longer than getting in your car, turning on the engine, putting it in drive, and going. Don't ever park facing in on a dead end. On the cul-de-sac, go around and come back the other direction. It is perfectly okay to be tactical. Nowhere here has anybody been rude to anybody yet. And the reason I say that is quite often when I talk to groups, again, people think in terms of if I'm this prepared and I'm thinking tactically and I'm thinking safely, somehow that's a cop thing. It's not. It's a safety issue. Think about the apartment complexes. Most of the large complexes, you can get maps. When I worked out in mid-county, I had maps for all the huge ones where you can just drive around in and never find the apartments. Even some of the smaller ones, you can get maps from the office managers. stop in. Once again, collect all these resources. Start a manual at the office. I work out of Northeast Portland. I have maps for the Columbia Villa and some of the other smaller complexes around that area. So I know that if we need to go do something over there, we just pull up to whatever general area we need to be in. We don't have to wander through the apartment complexes. Think about where you're parking in there. If you have to park on the street, go park on the street instead. If you have to park in a parking lot, which you may, back into the parking space. Once again, if you need to get out of there, you're going to have to back up if you don't do that. Evaluate the neighborhood. Are there people sitting in cars? And it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My neighborhood doesn't have too many people hanging out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Why are people all over the streets in the afternoon? Is this an area where there's more crime reports, maybe than some other areas that you're going to be knocking on houses? Is there a lot of traffic to one house? Again, I know that some people in this room have been doing this for a while, so they already have contact with local law enforcement. If you have that, get information on where the drug houses are. They have lists of who the drug houses are. If not, develop that contact. Call the precinct that you're going to be serving that area and ask to talk to usually it's a lieutenant, that's the neighborhood response lieutenant. Give them a call or give her a call. Find out what information can they provide you on a general basis when it comes to drug houses. Drug houses are dangerous. You may need one of them to go with you if you have to go into the drug house. Well, if you have to go in, you do definitely need to have backup. When in doubt, withdraw. Once again, it's perfectly okay. I tell my officers sometimes we withdraw, and we're operating under a peace officer statute. We go back with backup. We go back with assistance, and we go back with a different kind of plan. You will still, I'm sure, need to take care of business and what you're going to be needing to do, but there are different ways to do it, and it can quite often be done 2 hours later or be done the next day. Try to keep your hands free. Files, clipboards. It's interesting, when people get really stressed, they try to hang on to stuff. They have found dead officers with empty shell casings in their hands because they were trained. They always had, when they trained, empty shell casings. Okay, so they no longer train that way. If it is something that you do constantly, you are likely, once again, to do it under stress. That's why I say put your keys in the same pocket every time, because that's where your hand will go. Keep your hands free. If you have to take file material into homes, wear a backpack. I caution against purses of any kind, and I don't know if anyone here would take a handbag in. But I know that my first instinct about my purse is to protect it at all costs. And it is. And I can imagine sitting there going, dump the thing, Sue, and take off, instead of, and trying to hold on to it when I don't need to. Okay? Wear something that you're not attached to. Use a manner that it doesn't matter if you dump it, you lose it, oh well. I wouldn't put my cell phone in it. You can't get to it. Put a cell phone on a belt where you can get to it. Wear it, again, try to wear it the same place each and every single time. Some real basic. Same thing with your flashlight. A mini mag is really helpful for those stormy days. Put the mini mag in the same pocket that you've got. So you're all planned and you're still out there. You've parked in an appropriate place. You've decided, yes, I want to go do this home contact. As you proceed and you're walking up, note cover and concealment. And there's a difference between those two things. Cover will actually stop a bullet. Okay, an engine block is cover. Many of your car doors will stop your lower velocity bullets, especially if it has to go through 2 doors. I'm not insinuating you're going to be shot at, but once again, we're trying to prepare for the worst, and then we always plan for the best. Brick walls will stop bullets. All those things are cover. Think about where is your cover when you walk up. Concealment is different. Concealment allows you to hide. Bushes are concealment. They won't stop bullets, but they also may not find you in some of the thick laurel bushes or some of the other bushes that are on different property. It is okay if that's what you need to do. Part of the mental conditioning is deciding whether or not you're going to survive. Some people survive against odds that are incredible, and I've seen it on tape in that 3-day training where people have been shot numerous times, and they are still moving, and they are still talking, and they are still running, and they're still taking care of business, and they're getting away, and they save their own lives. Because they've made a decision in advance that they're going to survive. And that's something that I've made a decision after being in this business for 15 years, whatever it takes. As you're walking up, also look at the paths of escape when you approach the residence. Where can you take off? If you need to take off, where do I go? It's not just from people either. I am not a dog fan, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. There are mean dogs out there. Some of you are much more comfortable with dogs because you've owned them or you've trained them. Not everybody in this room will be. Look around for different signs of what type of residence, what type of area are you in. I drove down a dirt road in unincorporated Multnomah County, huge potholes. And it reminded me of a compound out of a bad movie of some kind, because here's this giant sign that says no trespassing, poorly spray painted and misspelled on a big piece of plywood. And it's a compound of like 4 houses, of which who knows if it had electricity. Now that was my first key that there were probably problems getting into doing a home contact on this compound, okay? What I would think is that you folks would turn around and leave. I decided to keep proceeding, and out came the dogs. Woof, 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 and they're jumping up on my windows. And once again, I have a fear of dogs, I admit it. I don't care for loose animals that I don't know, especially in these situations. They're usually not real cared for dogs, okay? Those were real close, those were real fast signs that I didn't belong there. And then I withdrew. And I went back to court and got a court order that the person couldn't even live there because we weren't going to be able to get in to do home contacts, period. And I was able to do that. Look at the trucks, look at the vans, look at the cars, look on the posts around the house, look on the fences. Does it say protected by Smith & Wesson and have a 357 in the window? Okay. And I've seen that. I've driven up to houses. That tells me real fast that there's an attitudinal difference going on between us and whoever is the occupant of the dwelling. Look for rifle racks. Look for signs of weapons of all kind. Now, there's a lot of people out hunting right now. They've got rifles in their rifle racks. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody that has an NRA sticker and a rifle rack is out there to hurt anybody, okay? You have to take things in their entirety. Look for drug and substance abuse indicators. Boarded up windows, especially windows that have the silver protective, reflective cover. Quite often there's a grow operation of some kind, not always, but that's not unusual. Or a meth lab, if you're in some parts of the Woodstock area of Portland, that's the meth lab area, and generally the biker area. Take a look at those things before you make a decision to go any further. Do they clean house by opening up the front door and throwing out the beer cans? I had a house like that in my neighborhood when I lived in Portland. It was a drug house, and we closed it down. Those are clear indicators that there are drug problems and there are alcohol problems. You walk into the house and the empty ones are to the ceiling, and I've seen that. Check for dogs again. Rattle that fence. Look for food dishes for the dogs. They may not be in the front yard. They may not come when you rattle the fence. Are there beware of dog signs? Are there chewed up dog toys? How big are the doggy bones? Are they the big rawhide ones? That's not a Chihuahua that's responding to those big, huge ones. I went into a backyard once, and we were there to arrest somebody, and I admit that's not something you'll be doing. And we're doing a quick peek method where you just kind of peek around the corner real fast, and usually you drop down a little bit because people are accustomed to seeing you at eye level. These two Dobermans hit the plate glass window with 4 feet running across the room. Scared the heck out of us. It was amazing that they just almost felt or heard our presence through a double-paned slider into the backyard. There hadn't been any signs yet that there were dogs. They were obviously, I mean, there was no kennel, no doghouse, no anything. We would have been in trouble if we actually could have gotten into the house by the front door. Look for people peeking out of windows. How many people do you think are in the house? How many cars are in the driveway? 2, 4? Are there 6 cars right in front of the house? Mostly you'll be operating during daytime hours. Most people are at work. Not all. I mean, there's shift workers. I've worked shifts before. If you're in juvenile detention, of course, you work shifts. Law enforcement works shifts. Service industries, people work shifts. However, generally, there aren't 8 people on swing shift. So there's a reason all those cars are there. Take a look at, try to figure out how many people are in there before you get that far. Since I'm short, I have to remind myself to look above my eye level. Look higher than your eye level. Look at the top floor. Look at the the little windows across the top. See if there's people peeking out. And it may be perfectly normal. I peek out the top window when somebody knocks on my door. But if there's a lot of people peeking, or they're trying to be hidden, or you can see silhouettes, once again, be concerned about it. Think about it. Does this feel okay to go any further? If you believe there's an imminent threat, your partner needs to know. When stress takes over, it's amazing sometimes how the tongue won't work quite as well as you think it should. I have had people find guns and they couldn't quite share that information with the rest of the search team because it scared them. Or the gun was near somebody that was in bed, which is not unusual. And you could hear a squeak, but you couldn't really hear the, I have a gun, he has a gun, let's leave. Whatever the words are. So once again, spend some time role-playing, thinking about what you want to do under what circumstance. Most people, and I deal with an offender population that what we supervise are all high risk and person-to-person. And I can still say that most of the people on our caseloads do not intend nor wish to hurt me. And I believe that. Now, that changes when you've been on a methamphetamine run for 3 days or on a crack cocaine run. That changes when you don't take your lithium, Prolixin, and Haldol sometimes. I supervised a man that killed 2 people and had done 25 years in the state penitentiary. And one of the people he killed was a lieutenant at Oregon State Pen. And I asked him why. And he said, well, he didn't know why. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And he said, and I really liked that lieutenant. He saved me during the Stephen Kessler riots down at the state penitentiary, saved him from being killed. And this inmate, parolee, later killed that lieutenant. He had not been on his stelazine, and he had gotten out of the special management unit. When medicated, he had never had an assaultive incident in 13 years. Unmedicated, he had killed 2 people. So 1 minute someone may be fine and they really don't mean any harm or anything, but you don't know in between that week of the last time maybe when you were there to talk to the parents about why the child again isn't back to school, you don't know what's happened during that 1 week period. Did they rob a bank and they think you know? Are they experiencing some psychosis? Are they paranoid? We don't have that information in between these periods of time. One of the more critical concerns is whenever you think you know somebody, rethink how well you think you know them. Once again, that can change in a matter of days. And we tend to do that because something has always been okay. Well, Joe Blow's reported in for 5 years, on time. The parents have been really nice. You know, they've done everything we want them to do. They may think that you're the parole officer. They may think you're a detective. They may not be thinking. So think about all of it before you go into a residence. I understand there's a question this morning about whether or not anybody had ever been killed doing home contacts. Or somebody was talking about it after Carl was here. In the state of Oregon, no one's been killed doing home contacts that I know of. None of our officers, and we do hundreds a week. And we do arrests and we do searches. We haven't had anybody shot. We've had people shot at. I've had guns pointed at me, but we haven't had anybody stabbed. Some of it's luck. A lot of it is this, just pure and simple pre-planning. Thinking about what we're doing, backing out when we need to, taking people back in when we need to, and we're in high-risk situations when we're going in to do a search. And quite often we know that they're highly volatile at that situation. Once again, we try to prepare for the worst. We don't want to be paranoid, but we really need to think about this kind of, this information today. Tell you what, why don't we take a break now before I go on to the next performance objective? Some people are nodding. If we talk, about 30 minutes, I bet I can finish, and then we'll have time to really ask some questions. One of the comments during the break was that I work with people who are probably higher risk and more dangerous than you folks will be working with. Yes and no. I know that when I go to homes and there's children in the home, I'll be doing field work with my officers. 20% of our offender population are women. Women usually have custody of the children. We're doing field work. Those kids aren't in school. We go from there. These are the same households that you'll be in. We go into other households and you won't know sometimes where the father or the boyfriend or someone will be coming in and out of that home that you're visiting. I would suspect that 1/3, and I don't know, it'd be interesting to start finding out how many have been involved in the criminal justice system that you will be running into. Whether or not they will be the primary parent. These are folks that are crashing in the back room, sleeping on the couch, the sons, the daughters, the parents, the nephews, but there are a lot of other people in the house that some of which may be on supervision. Children get to school generally if they're in stable households. My daughter gets to school every day unless she's sick. So something tells me that there's something awry in the household generally if kids aren't getting to school. I went through 3 lice alerts in like a month and a half in my own home, but my daughter still got back to school. Okay, so there's still something a little more remiss in the situation when kids literally are not getting to school on a routine basis. And I don't mean the occasional. Sometimes things happen. The whole household gets sick. And you don't have a lot of resources. And you don't have the type of job like I do where I can just not go to work if I don't have to. And you will be in those kind of homes. And you'll problem solve and the situation will get taken care of fairly quickly, I suspect. Where were we? I think we're right at the residence. You've prepared in advance. You've parked where you're supposed to. You're getting close to the front door. Everything's a go still. All your senses say it's still a go. This is not to the risk level that I would withdraw on. You're not done yet. What do you hear coming from the house? How many people do you think are in the home? Do you hear male voices, female voices? Do you hear children's voices? Is there a child screaming? Does it sound like a 2-year-old tantrum, or does it sound like a child that's not being cared for? Do people sound agitated? Have you walked into the middle of an argument of some kind? Or do you just hear voices and people are going about their business? You know, asking somebody to go get me this, go get me that. Those are different things to evaluate before you even have to knock on the door yet. You can still leave. There's a lot of decision points as you go along where you can change your mind. It's always okay to change your mind. Try to avoid being seen if possible. That gives you a longer period of time to change your mind, and other people not having the opportunity to react to you. You cannot control other people's reactions. You can only control your actions. When you go to knock on the door, please don't stand in front of the door. There isn't a need to generally. Now, some of the apartment complexes are a little bit difficult because you're at the top of a landing and stairways. There isn't any place to stand but in front of the door. Even then, I have to do the best I can. Sometimes I stand on the top step and I knock on the door. Once again, they may not know who you are, why you're there. They may decide that they really think that you're an authority of some kind. That means to do something to them. And when you are checking on people's children, that does elicit a protective response. I don't know if you've ever been called in for parent-teacher conference when your child isn't doing too great. Maybe you don't think that it's as big of an issue as they do. But it does get a protective response out of most people, talking about their children, talking about problems in the household. They may know who you are before you get there. They don't even want to deal with you. Or they may think that you're parole and probation. They may think you're the FBI. You don't need to stand in front of the door. If possible, have your partner stand on the other hinge side. For one thing, this requires the occupant to open the door to talk with you. It's always better if you can gather information rather than them gathering as much information. If they only open the door this much, what have you seen? This much of a face, not much more. When they have to actually open the door, the person over here on the hinge side sees through the door this direction, and they can see some of the stuff that's going on. If you're on this side, the doorknob side, you can engage the person quite often. Some of this you may be doing on the front porch anyway, and that's fine. Some of it you may be wanting to go into the home. That is a way for you to get a bigger view of the person that you're getting ready to engage in. The person on the hinge side needs to be prepared to communicate different information to you. There's also what we call the fatal funnel. We do not want to be in the fatal funnel. If you're standing in front of a door, all you see, because of the way a door is, you see straight in a house if you're directly in front of a door. Okay, think of this as the door. All you see is straight in like this. Occupants, though, who are in the house see it at an angle like this. So this person here, 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 and here, they see that much more information than you do. Okay? In law enforcement, they call that the fatal funnel. And that's where a lot of people get hurt, is in the doorway. You don't have to stand in front of a door. It's okay. It's not rude. It gives you more time to gather information. As you're going into the house, take your time. Generally, it's kind of a little, especially if you haven't met somebody, it's kind of a nervous situation. That is their home. Usually, most people wait to be invited into people's homes. You're wondering what's really going on. What is the problem in this home? Take your time as you walk in to really be able to look around the room. Is there a prominent display of weapons? It's amazing some of the stuff I have seen people think is living room decorations, like brass knuckles on a wall, complete with samurai swords, a whole wall full of weapons. That might be your clue that there's a little bit of an obsession going on here. Whether or not they're going to use them on you is another story. But it does give you some information that these people, whoever is in the home, do like weapons. Bedrooms generally are where you're going to find most of the weapons, which you won't be entering into. Although you may want to see the layout of the home. You may want to see the child's bedroom. You're going to be there problem solving. I imagine you want kids back in school. So you're going to try to take care of whatever problem it is. Is there alcohol on the table? Are there beer cans at 9 a.m. in the morning? Are the little drug trays out there? Are there needles when you walked up to the house? Are there signs of violence? Are there fist marks through the plaster on the wall? The kitchen is often a real good sign of domestic violence. For some reason, I find doors that have been pulled off, hinged doors on cupboards that have been pulled off the wall. And I don't know if that's where the fight starts, but that's where I quite often take a look. That's also, if you want to know if kids are being fed, of course, where you take a look. Is the place fit for human consumption? I would imagine that you will be doing some reporting back to Children's Protective Services if you run into things that are beyond your scope. Try to minimize chaos. Once again, it is a stressful situation for everybody for you to be in their home. You're inquiring about their children. You're looking at family problems. Try to minimize the stress. Ask them to turn the TV off. Ask them to turn the radio down. Have them put the pit bull in a different room than you're in. That's always my request. Would you please put the dog in the bathroom? Would you please put the dog in your bedroom? I have them put it where I don't want to go generally. And close the door. And that's okay. Well, you put the dog outside. Try to minimize the chaos when you're in the house. That helps lower people's stress levels. I have a hard time with too much auditory disturbance when there's just way too much going on around me. Makes my stress level go up. So I always try to minimize that by doing a little bit of a control on the situation. And if there's kids screaming, there isn't much you can do about that except offer to help for 5 seconds to organize the room. Don't be afraid to ask questions about what's going on in the house. You may need to know this information later. Someone else may need to know that information. I may end up calling you for some reason, or you may end up calling me to say, will you go with me? And that does occur, where people contact the parole and probation officer and say, will you go with me? Of course, we're more than happy to go with you. Try to find out who's living in the house. That does impact kids and what you're seeing and what's going on. I don't find that people are that adverse to telling you unless they have felony warrants for their arrest. Overall, they'll tell you their name. Ask who's staying in the house. If there's other people on the property. Do you have relatives on the property? There are ways to politely inquire as you're having conversations about who's around. That will give you information. It will give me information, and ultimately it may be a law enforcement issue. Be alert when somebody's always kind of looking at something, okay? Generally, they don't want you to go somewhere, and they don't want you to look at it. And why? It's almost a natural response of people. Kids do it. No, Mommy, I didn't do it. And it's amazing how they're looking right at the stuff on the wall that they just drew with a red crayon. But they'll look at it each time. They're not controlled enough to say, what crayon on the wall, Mother? They don't do that. People will look when they're nervous and they're afraid of something. That's where you may see a weapon. It's amazing how far into a house you can get and not notice things. I'm supposed to be trained to notice all these things. I've walked by a shotgun that was leaned up at the front door. Just walked by it. I just didn't see it. My partner saw it, which was really good, but I didn't see it. I have not noticed a rifle rack. Now, of course, the people I supervise cannot have these weapons. But tell me, who is going hunting with a shotgun at the front door? There may be a reason for the rifle rack. There may be a reason for the gun safe that is perfectly legitimate. But a shotgun at the front door or a baseball bat at the front door leaning up in the corner generally is not there for a legitimate purpose. They may be looking for the drugs. Ignore the drugs. That would be my advice to you folks. Try to finish your business real fast. Come back another day. I probably wouldn't make an issue of any of it if I were in your position. I might even pretend I didn't see it and say, you know, it would be much better if you came into my office to talk about this kind of stuff, or talk about why your child isn't in school, or let's try to get you help with, you know, with cleaning the home again or something. Ignore it. You don't have to notice everything. I want you to notice it for you, for your safety, not that you have to do something about it. That's your key, that's your clue to leave. I have ignored things, left, and come back, but I come back with backup when I do that. Think about once again, as you're going into the house, how are you going to leave? Have your exit route planned. Try not to have the occupant between you and the door, unless you know where the back door is and you know that you can get out the back door. Trailers are awful, and I suspect you're going to be in some trailer parks. There isn't a back door. We had an officer that was shot at, and this is many years, this is over 15 years ago, in Dallas, Oregon, who had to actually get through a window in the back of a trailer. And this was not a small officer. He was a good-sized person, and he had permanent back injury from doing it. If you don't have to go in far enough where there's somebody between you and the door, don't. Or just be advised, where are the doors? Where are the exits? I may need to know that later also, or local law enforcement may need to have that information later. Try to keep your partner in sight. Try not to get separated if you can help it, into different rooms. I don't know how you're going to be doing your teamwork or how you're going to be conducting your business once you're in the house, but we try to keep our partners in view at all time. It's a lot safer. You can't communicate with people when you can't see them. You don't want to leave your partner. I don't think most people in this room are going to walk out the door and leave their partner in there, but you may feel that you really need to be leaving right now. Try to keep your partner with you. It's okay to tell people, for safety issues, we have policies and procedures. I've done that. People say, well, why do you have to do so-and-so? I say, it's part of our procedure. We do this the same way every time we do this. Please don't take offense. This is what we do. We do this the same time. Try to stay together. Arrange your seating, if possible, to utilize barriers, natural barriers of the house, to enhance your safety. A coffee table between you and the occupant, or whoever you're talking with, it takes time to get over a coffee table. I like kitchen tables, although I know that there's weapons. I mean, the kitchen is full of weapons. We call them edged weapons. However, those chairs, usually in kitchens, don't have any place to hide anything. They're kitchen chairs, and they're real basic. Quite often, the back door is where the kitchen is also. It's also a table. I suspect that at different times you'll have paperwork that you do want to work on. It's also easier if you're up a little bit higher than down on a coffee table to keep some eye contact, to be able to know what people's movements are like throughout the house. These natural barriers give you more time to think and give you more time to move if you need to. Once again, it may not be the person that you're talking with that you're going to have the problem with. We often have more problems with the parents and the spouses of the offender than we do the offender themselves. With them screaming at us, you can't take him away. You know, when we've already agreed that it's only going to be a 5-day jail sanction for relapsing, and then he's going to go do the day reporting center, where we've already had a conversation with the offender about what the consequences are. And we find that the spouse wants to jump on us, or the father is in our face to the point that we're backing off the property, with the offender going, "Don't go there, Dad, you'll get me in more trouble." And I believe that quite often the problems you will have, if you have any, will be from people that aren't even central to what you're trying to do, which is very frustrating to be in that type of situation. It's also frustrating for the person you're trying to deal with, because then they've got a push and shove situation going on in their own emotions and their own mind, because they just want you out of there. Try to maintain a defensible position. Don't turn your back on people if you don't have to. And there'll be some households that you can be almost 100% sure there is not a risk here. Always be careful when you think you're 100% sure. But we're also not talking paranoia, that everybody out there is out to get us. Not everyone is. My folks aren't. But try to maintain a defensible position. It is okay to not turn your back to occupants, especially if you're fairly uncomfortable. Try to stay out of arm's reach. What I find is to try to talk with somebody and to try to gain cooperation. Generally, people stand maybe about this far away. Is that about how far away you might stand? Somebody? That's too close. Because they can take you off your feet before you've almost blinked. It's amazing how fast people can move. I don't think about that. I have a hard time with some of this sometimes because I don't think about how fast I can hit somebody. I don't think about, well, what if the police come and haul me away, or CPS is going to come take my children. I don't have these kind of thoughts, so I don't sit around thinking how fast can I hit somebody. But I know that if you're in arm's reach, they'll take you off your feet before you notice it, and you're going to find yourself sitting on the ground. Okay. You don't have to be in arm's reach to be polite. Try to stay a little bit out of arm's reach. That's where coffee tables are nice. It's okay to say, I'm uncomfortable with this. Come to the office. I'm uncomfortable with this. Why don't we sit over here? It is okay to take some control of the situation. You don't have to be officers to take control of a situation in an appropriate manner. That you would be more comfortable sitting here. We can get our work done better if we sit over here and do it this way. Come into the office. I'd like you to talk to somebody else. Utilize all of those skills, all of those alternatives. You are not stuck being where you are. Try to keep your body weight centered. If the worst happens, believe it or not, you will survive getting hit. I have been hit. I am okay. I got hit in training so hard it brought tears to my eyes, and I saw stars by one of my own officers with an arm bar right across the face like this, and I didn't go down. Cracked a crown. Bummer. I'm always doing something to a crown. And it was an accident, obviously, but I survived it. You will too, but I was centered. I was grounded. You don't have to stand in a boxer's stance. But if you're rocking on your feet, not paying attention, kind of back on what we call your weak side, okay, try to center yourself. Think about these type of things when you're out working. You also don't want to fall off of something. I don't know about some, I'm into bifocals now. Okay, I do not see the same way I did 2 years ago. I do not see curbs. I don't wear these usually when I'm out walking around. I do not judge the distances anymore like I did on the curbs and the floors, sunken living rooms. Staff safety, once again, isn't just preventing you from being hurt by people. It's also just those things, like I said earlier, falling off of curbs, falling down into sunken living rooms, putting your foot through rotten floorboards, going down into a basement. I don't know why you'd be there, but having a floor, or by having a staircase totally break away, which can happen. Okay. A lot of people haven't really maintained some of the homes that you're going to be going into. Some of the hazards will not, once again, be the people. It will be some of the environmental issues. I was in a home where it was raining and the ceiling was buckled, and I could hear the sizzle of the rain on the electric wiring. And there were kids in the house. And we had the kids removed and the house condemned. The danger at that point really was not the offender that we were dealing with. It was the environmental conditions of the house.
Is it a rented house?
Pardon?
Was that house rented? I mean, did someone, they were renting it?
Yeah, one family owned the whole compound. I won't give you names, but there's a lot of places in Portland like that. No, this was a family that they had all their family live there. Oh. Yeah. So maybe the slumlords to themselves, but that's not that unusual. I found when I worked out in Mid-County. They have dads and parents own all this property and all their kids lived in it, but they may have been burning garbage. And there was no sewer or something. And that's why the kids weren't getting to school. And mother was having drug-affected babies. So you will be in some of those homes. Stay out of arm's reach. Keep your body centered. Use good sense when you're in a house. You're going to be fine. As you leave, is there any information on your way out that you want to have? Take down vehicle license numbers. That's part of my bread and butter and part of local law enforcement bread and butter. I think of all of us as a network in a safety system. Interventions, to me, aren't negative. Now, the intervention may mean eventually somebody goes to jail, but that's still a form of intervention. Sometimes people have to be stopped. I don't know why you would want the license numbers, but you may. Some of you are working in the juvenile court arena. You want to know who those cars belong to. Who are the parents? Are these really the people we think they are? And you'll have access to the law enforcement data systems also. It will be too late later, though, if I call you and say, well, were there cars there? Yeah, what kind? I don't know. That'll be too late for me to get that information. So write down the license plate, just jot it down. Most communication, the majority of communication is nonverbal. There are different things that I look for. And some of these are things that I've learned through a lot of office contacts, not just field work, but office contacts with people. You're sitting at a table. You're sitting in the living room. People are on the edge of the seat for a reason. It's generally not because they're uncomfortable. In fact, I don't think there's even anybody here sitting on the edge of the seat. Generally, people are getting up to go somewhere. They're very uncomfortable. They don't want to be there. They're getting ready to spring. You can't spring when you're sitting totally back. That's not, the body doesn't do it that way. When you're sitting talking with somebody, think about, what are they looking like? What are they really communicating to me? I think that most of you, not most of you, I think all of you have seen discrepancies between what people are saying but what they're really saying. Okay? Be alert to that. Trust yourself when you see those type of discrepancies in people's body language as opposed to what they're saying. Yes, my daughter will be there tomorrow, and people are going like this. And it's amazing the responses that people will give you, and they don't know that their body is telling you these different things. Watch their teeth. People that start talking in the back of their throat, and their teeth, and you can just see the jaw starting to tighten. Men will tend to do fist stuff, and you can almost see it sometimes when they're standing, when they're starting to get really agitated with their fists. The focused eye contact